number 9, I believe, in our series of conversations on making data science work. And today's topic, of course, is data privacy by design and how organizations can fold that into their DNA. And I'm very happy to invite and to have Dr. Kalpit Desai join us. Dr. Kalpit Desai is a friend of Scribble Data. So Kalpit, after completing his PhD in biomedical engineering, worked at companies like GE Research, at Tally, Bijli, and a few other startups. And today he's one of the founders of DataCult, which is an AI algorithm development company. Kalpit's interests in the data space span the cutting edge, from computer vision to robotics to the fundamentals like privacy, which we'll talk about today. And with that, especially in the context of the fast-moving PDP bill, the Personal Data Protection Bill, and also the NPD, the non-personal data, with all of the sort of forces that are at play right now, we felt that this would be a timely conversation. So thank you, Kalpit, for joining us. And of course, Venkata and I are from Scribble Data. We are a feature store company. We help companies that are looking to put machine learning models into production with the kind of robust software infrastructure they need to be able to do their feature engineering. Now, just before we get started, I thought maybe we'll just sort of level set about what we mean by data privacy and what private data is in the context of a business, after which we'll sort of freewheel for a bit. So the bulk of all information today that is processed by businesses is implicitly public data. For example, the existence of a brand, a product, a company, since all of this is traded across multiple businesses. But some example criteria to identify data that is private is basically anything that violates anonymity. So some obvious examples are like the PAN number of an individual, or their TIN number, their bank account number. Business confidential information like financials, inventory levels, bill of materials, all of this are private information. The actual transaction that any two businesses do between each other is private information. So I think a good rule of thumb is that when you're in doubt about a specific data point, about whether it's public or private, or if you're thinking on the fence, just give the benefit of the doubt, it is private data, and work backwards from there. So with all of this in mind, Kalpit, I'd love to ask you about what it means for businesses to be folding privacy into the way they approach their data science. Some initial thoughts on this, please.
Sure, Indra. First, thanks a lot for hosting me on this platform. Very excited to share my thoughts and some of the first-hand stories on what it means to operate with data privacy by design, right? So initially, off the bat, what I would like to highlight is that this data privacy by design must be a very conscious call and a very explicit culture that is set from top down, from the leadership all the way to all layers of the development staff, right? The reason is when you take a look of 20 years, 30 years, that long-term view when you take, there is not much difference between what is best for the customer and what is best for your business. So data privacy by design, actually in that long-term view, is actually a durable competitive advantage, is what I would like to highlight in this talk. And I will give some examples why that is the case.
I think that is very profound, actually, and we'll keep coming back to this because we'll see short-term trade-offs, but long-term benefits, and I think we'll keep resonating on that point for a bit. Please carry on.
Excellent. So yeah, so that is my my summary. That if you want to claim that you are a customer-centric company, then you cannot say that yes I am customer-centric, but customers' data privacy. Let me first build my software and then I'll bolt on the privacy on top of that. That doesn't work that way, right? Privacy has to be thought from day one. It has to be a part of your regular rhythm of designing the software, designing the tools, designing the processes around it. And only then you can say that, yes, I have built something that is going to protect the data privacy of my customers in a reasonable manner. So,
That's right.
So in your cluster was Tally. For people who don't know, Tally's analytics arm is called Cluster.
right.
At Cluster, what reasons did the leadership give you for going through the very significant effort of the overall system design with the serious privacy constraints? Because clearly there is a cost associated with it.
Certainly, certainly. So that's a very good point. So Tally Analytics and Tally Solutions, right? They both are sister companies. Um, Tally has been thinking about data privacy well before GDPR was a word. So their view or their prioritization and emphasis on data privacy did not come from compliance angle. It came, as far as I understand, it came directly from this very core principle that customer is at the center of whatever you want to do. And if customer is at the center, these our customers are businesses, and their data is going to be very, very sensitive. Much of the business, not much, but a lot of business data could be sensitive information, and businesses are very, very protective of that data naturally, right? So from day one, I think even 10 years back, some of the written documents and some of the archives that we were reviewing, right? This idea of was there that we need to build, when we are going to work with business data, we need to build our systems and our processes so strongly around data privacy so that nobody inside Tally, regardless of whatever their access rights may be to the database or to all the systems of Tally or the servers of Tally, nobody inside Tally should be able to figure out where a specific piece of data came from. So this was a very clear overarching guideline that this is what anonymization meant. If you are, if at any point of time we are not sure that this data could, I can take this data, triangulate that with these three other public data points, and then figure out the source of this data point from Tally, then I should not get the data point. And I need to design my Tally system so that the Tally system will not send the data point to me as an analytics person, right? So to come back to the question, I think the core reason was customer centricity in this case, in the case of Tally.
I think that's such a profound point because it's easy for businesses to delude themselves into thinking that the more data we're able to gather about our customer, the more we'll understand them, and the more we'll be able to personalize products, recommendations, offers, all of them for the benefit of the customer.
Correct.
But truly, I mean, this was ahead of its time. And Kalpit, maybe since you've talked about a few of the constraints that were sort of baked into Tally's mindset, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about some of those hard constraints that, even though Tally could have had access to this data, because nobody was asking Tally to be this conscious about data privacy. If you can just, as a data scientist, joining Tally today, one might have an expectation about the rich trove of data, and there is rich trove of data, but the way Tally has protected or created little silos, if you can just give us a few examples to sort of concretize this.
Right. Sure. So let me tell you some real stories of working at Tally, which was a very remarkable experience, a very learning rich journey. From the day one, in fact, even when I was just considering the position of joining Tally, and I was talking to the MD and the rest of the leadership, it was very clearly conveyed that the first priority of the business for your role would be to put in place the gates and filters which ensure that the data is anonymized at source. Yes, you can experiment and do explorations for data science core algorithm developments, which will actually do analytics on that data. But don't bother too much about it until you yourself have proven that this data that you are getting is adequately anonymized. Now, this statement itself raises many questions. What does it mean to be adequately anonymized, right? How do you put in systems, and how do you design this logic? In fact, it can be when you go down deep into that rabbit hole, it can even be as complex algorithm as a GAN that you need to ensure that a piece of data is actually fully anonymized, right? So just to take an example, most companies, most other companies that I have heard of, anonymization, data anonymization for them is taking a piece of data and masking certain attributes from it, which look, so sensitive. Some of the examples are there in the case studies also, that PAN, these are obvious examples that you should mark, PAN number and GSTIN and so on, that you should mask because it is sensitive piece, right? Now let's think about this, whether that is adequately optimized. Even with a very few examples, we can prove that this is not adequately optimized. The
Actually,
tools,
if I can just on that point, right? The point that masking does not adequately anonymize, it's possible to be able to take 2 or 3 fields of information and triangulate back to source if somebody really wanted to, right? That's why you're saying this is inadequate.
that is a separate issue. But let's say you didn't even have those 2 3 other
Fields.
data points
Yeah.
for triangulating, right? Let's say you got one data point with this few fields masked. The technology in AI today is sufficiently advanced where you can get a reasonable estimate of these 4 fields based on the values of other 10 fields. For example, it is very trivial today to mask my nose, and I feed that masked face to my algorithm. It will regenerate my nose, which will not be looking very different from my actual nose, right? So this unmasking technology is already there. Even if that technology works, let's say,
Especially the times of Corona, this is very dangerous. Sorry,
yes.
bad joke. Let's go for that.
Okay. So and the same applies to text data also, right? You mask a few words in a sentence, and the algorithms are there which work with more than 80% accuracy. They will regenerate the similar words, and sometimes even exactly same words. Now think about, even if that technology is accurate only 1% of the time, then directly that 1% of the data is leaked, right? Data anonymization cannot have that even 1% error rate, right? Because the stakes are too high.
Right.
So clearly this is not sufficient, and that's where one of the points that I would like to highlight in this talk is that I, as a head of data science at Tally Analytics, I spent tremendous amount of my time in designing these filters. Nearly, if I had to estimate, I would say it is more than a year of my time that I spent in designing these gates and filters, and I was not yet done. I can say that I was not yet done, because there was, so when you really go deep down into and think from the customer's point of view, it is not trivial. It is not trivial, at least in the case of Tally.
This is just so forward-looking, Kalpit, that it is blowing my mind a little bit. What I mean by that is, look, this is serious investment, not just the salary of the head of data at Tally, but the opportunity cost of what else could have been worked on during that time, and plus the opportunity cost of actually mining that data for something. This is really, I mean, this is culture, this is DNA, and this is ethics. I am blown away by that. In the interest of time, Kalpit, you talked about the anonymization a little bit. If you can tell us a little bit about what you felt like were the trade-offs that were happening as a result of doing this.
Um, See, the obvious trade-off is on the life of the team that is building the analytics algorithm, because now you most likely will not have access to the rich and very interesting data to build models on. Because of these anonymization principles, and for very right reasons, you will end up removing a lot of data. You may not even get a lot of data if the data that you get is going to come in bits and pieces without any interconnections to them revealed to you. um, the those bits and pieces will also be masked adequately, so that there is no possibility of reverse engineering, reverse ID. So as a data analytics, then you have to start from ground up, because nothing like this is there is no precedent to this kind of preference of this kind of work. So you have to start from first principles and figure out, okay, what kind of products can I commit based on this data? And then you have to work with the product team, you have to work with the engineering team and say, okay, from this set of products which are amenable, compatible to our data anonymization, data privacy principles, which are the products that we want to pursue? And then that itself takes its own time and effort. And as you rightly said, it is a huge investment, and it only this kind of investment can only materialize, only happen if there is very clear mindset from the top that compared to the cost of not doing this investment is still much less.
But
So,
for the data scientist himself or herself, there is a conflict of interest, right? On one side, they are anonymizing and making it difficult to analyze. On the other side, they are on the hook to deliver the modeling or the analytical results. Um, do you see an organizational change as well associated with this?
Absolutely, very good point, Venkata. So in the case study, I have put a suggestion that an effective way of ensuring that your data acquisition pipelines are adequately anonymized and adequately equipped for data anonymization at source. You should ensure two things. One, the team that is building these filters and algorithms for anonymization should be kept at an arm's length with the team which is actually responsible to build the analytics products. In most cases, even if there is anonymization done, currently these two teams are same people because the skill sets are same. And then there is conflict of interest, and then just because of how human mind and psychology works, you can pretty much be guaranteed that there will be some bias in the anonymization. There will be some compromise of the anonymization principles, right? So first thing is to keep these two things separate. Second thing that I recommend is that in the team that is building these anonymization principles, there should at least be one person, preferably when be an outsider, who outsider because then outsider does not have any incentive in making the data availability easier for building of the analytics products. And that person should be overseeing the development and design of this anonymization gates and filters. That person should be experienced enough to have done this once, should be also aware of the data science algorithm breadth, and should be an outsider. So yes, I definitely see that an organization where this split is being observed and practiced would do well in long term for complying with the data anonymity principles.
Now, Kalpit, one of the things that struck me as fairly important in terms of extracting value from this. At the end of the day, Tally is a for-profit business. Any other company that is investing in this kind of data privacy by design, they will all. I mean, they're free to be for-profit businesses, and part of what I think might make it sustainable to have these trade-offs that you're talking about is being able to convey to customers, the end users, about the pains that are being taken to secure their data, to actually keep their data private. Now, unfortunately, actually, um, the layperson is not very conversant with what it means to be so data compliant.
Hmm.
I know that there are rating systems being proposed in the ecosystem of discussions around PDP as well as NPD, but none of this existed earlier when Tally was doing this. But did you feel that at Tally there was an effort to make customers conscious of this, because it would be a great selling point? If it wasn't the case, then I do hope that they will take it up now. Any word on the marketing side and this the how the mileage of this effort might have been used?
Sure. So at least during my tenure, I don't think they advertised this point because a lot of this work was still internal because we are still building, as I said, the gates and filters of the anonymization. So, but I believe once those filters were adequately tested and built and now ready for release, they would have leveraged their existing very rich, very penetrating partners network to educate the end customers about why first of all it is their option. You can always choose not to share any data with Tally. uh, Secondly, they would be shown what kind of data Tally servers would receive, and looking at that data, it should be very clear that you get, let's say, a string called apple. You don't even know if this is mobile phone brand or a fruit, right?
Right.
So that would give the comfort to the customer. But yes, during my tenure, these efforts were more at this marketing efforts were more at the conceptual stage. They were not yet rolled out.
Coming to your earlier point about a neutral third party looking at the anonymization and probably even at the modeling side of these things, how are you seeing the given PDP in the background? How are you seeing the ecosystem developing on this front? Um, will there be new players or model risk management companies or model auditing companies and so on?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. So at some point of time, it is not clear to me whether it is 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, but I'm sure that at some point of time, across the world, there will be companies that do model audit. There will be companies that put trustworthiness score on a given product or even given a company, right? And those organizations, in some cases, because of the if let's say if we have an organization which is equivalent to ICRA for data, then that organization has very concentrated power in this ecosystem, and then it may make sense that there are government officials and other uh, uh, third-party committees overseeing the operations of on the board of those organizations. So I definitely see these new type of companies emerging over next, let's say, 2 to 5 years in the ecosystem. And because of that, then you will also have companies which build this data pipelines to make audits, to facilitate audit of the data, to facilitate audit of the model, to facilitate audit of their model outputs, model predictions also, right? Currently, a lot of this is also not streamlined in most of the companies, right? You have a model which is, a zip file stored somewhere. Nobody knows how to reproduce it, and it produces some output which, if it is not desirable, you don't have a very good intuition or very good way to figure out why it is not desirable, right? What went wrong. I think these are a lot of these things will change, and of course the model transparency is a part of it. ML operations, feature store, all of that is also going to be a big part of this, I think.
So there's a question from Zainab, and she asks if Kalpit can speak a little bit more about the data anonymization and what it was that he specifically did. Um, Further, she goes to say, are there standard approaches to data anonymization that companies in similar domain follow, like say QuickBooks? Do we have any information about Tally's competitors and whether they adopted any of this?
I personally don't know what kind of anonymization competitors do. I have also not seen other companies working on business data providing analytics across businesses, but that may already be happening. I have just not seen examples. Now, in terms of data anonymizations standards, I if there are standards, I don't think they are adequate at this point. And the reason is I already said that anonymization typically is limited to masking or removing certain attributes from a piece of data, and that is not always sufficient. That is usually not sufficient, in my opinion. Now, so, how do you do anonymization? Well, let me give you a few examples of the design that we had at Tally. And again, this is not rolled out. Tally is not gathering this data at this point. But the design was that, let's say there is a juice shop in Kormangla which is selling a very proprietary, their in-house shake, that is shake, or let's say some rosemary gold uh, faluda lassi, let's say. And there is nobody in Kormangla selling this lassi, this particular type of lassi. Then even the master's item data that the Tally client of that customer will not send this master's item to Tally analytics servers, because that master's item is very, very unique, and it can be used to uniquely identify the source of the data point. So what would happen in this case? What would anonymization do? Well, if there is any doubt, uh, that piece, that master item, stock item, will not be sent. It will be with the customer itself.
Sorry, but Kalpit, in this case, is there a human in the loop that's looking at this? How
No,
would
no.
you identify whether
This
or
is,
not it is unique enough to be to not be sent?
so there is on each. I mean, there will be on each Tally installation, on-premise installation, there will be an agent, software agent, which will be responsible to determine whether a given piece of data is unique or not. And that uniqueness is derived based on that agent's knowledge, which it shares from the middle layer in Tally's pipeline, about how many other businesses have similar product. If there are less than n could be some number. If there are less than n businesses with that product in their masters, then the agent will not send the data for analytics, right? So, so this is one way. In this case, one way the agent may decide to anonymize the data is that it says that remove everything, just say lassi, because lassi is a common product. Other way the agent can decide is break this into multiple parts. Send faluda as one item, send lassi as another item, send whatever the other thing I said, I forgot as the third.
Rosemary gold. How could you forget?
Marigold rosemary. So let's say that as a third piece, and the nobody beyond this on-premise Tally server will know that this pieces came from the same source. where
Wonderful.
linkages should be broken off. So this is
Wonderful.
one example of doing anonymization.
So, Kalpit, we are experimenting with a shorter format this time around. We wanted to keep this to a half hour. This has flown by. I thought the half hour would keep it crisp, but I also feel like we're just sort of only whetting our appetite right now. So
Should
maybe
we
we
just
can,
take the one last question?
we'll take one more question and then close. So Suchana had a question about if whether Tally had any ongoing model audit efforts with respect to privacy and anonymization. I think there's some flavors you've given us, but if you can just elaborate a little bit more on this.
Not really, because at least during my tenure, we mostly focused on building this anonymization agent and their gates and filters.
Yeah.
We were working on the model design, and there were a lot of effort was done in designing some of these analytics models, but that was always the lower priority, and we did not even have a model built that was ready for production. So,
So I'll extend a branch to Tally. I think it was this business of doing privacy was so much in your DNA that by default you were exempt from audit, meaning this is what you were focusing all of your time on. I think audit is for those of us that are looking for loopholes always. So
I don't think so.
so in Tally,
I think once we had a model, I am sure that the focus on audit would have come at that time, even within Tally, because
I think we should acknowledge the fact that upon request, actually Tally was actively cooperating to actually document the case study, which is linked from the event page. I highly recommend that all the audience actually looks at that, because there is some amount of detail and for some forward-looking thoughts there.
actually, if I can just give that link for people that are watching on YouTube and haven't seen it, I'm going to call it out. You can just slow down the video here and watch it and type it out. It's tallysolutions.com/tally/privacy of business data Tally case study. Each of these words separated by a hyphen. I'll repeat the last bit. Privacy hyphen of hyphen business hyphen data hyphen tally hyphen case hyphen study. So thank you very much, Kalpit. Like I said, we did want to keep it crisp, and hopefully you've given out enough little hooks for people to actually want to go and read the Tally case study. And if folks want to get in touch with Kalpit, what's a good way, maybe on Twitter or somewhere, to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I am available on LinkedIn typically, and you can always drop me an email at hello@datakalp.com.
Wonderful. And so, yeah, while we have people clamoring for more, this is where I'd like to wrap up, especially because I know there are more questions. Thank you so much, Kalpit. I feel like this is a conversation that could have kept going, and maybe we'll come back and talk about some of the other companies that you worked at as well, like GE as well as Bijli. So thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks a lot for hosting me, Indra and Venkata.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Take care, everyone. Venkata, if I can just trouble you to stay online for about a minute.